G'day guys, good to see you again. Benjamin Harley here. Thank you so much for tuning in for another editing tutorial. It's been a hot minute since I've done one of these, so apologies for that. Not only have I moved house since I made one of these, I've actually moved cities altogether. The Sydney lockdown was just dragging on and really starting to get to me, hence why my hair's getting a little bit out of hand. Haven't had a haircut in about 4 months, so I figured it was a good time to get out of Sydney and set up shop in the beautiful central coast of New South Wales. However, that being said, now that I'm fully settled in, I'm ready to start cranking out these sorts of tutorials for you guys. Anyway, we're not here to talk about where I'm living, we're here to talk about Moody Greens. If you're not sure what I'm talking about an edit that looks a little something like this. This is an editing style that's super popular at the moment. I feel like 5 years ago, a lot more people were going for super bright, vibrant, colorful edits, but now I'm seeing more and more people gravitate towards these desaturated, muted, moody tones. So I thought for my next tutorial, I would teach you guys exactly how to do that edit. As always, before I get started with the tutorial, you'd be doing me a big favor if you hit that subscribe button, if you give this video a like and a comment, follow me on Instagram, all that fun stuff. It really does make a difference and gives me the motivation I need to keep cranking out these tutorials for you guys. But enough mucking around, let's get stuck into the edit. So this is the raw image we're going to be working with today. I've already cropped in nice and close to this plant here, which is going to be our main subject. There are a few more of the same type of plant around in the background and another one down here, but this is going to be the hero of the image, if you will. I'm going to quickly come over here and do some very basic edits in the basics tab. However, most of the Moody Green goodness is going to come from the tone curve and especially the HSL tab. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail on those. So I'll just quickly go over a basic edit now. I think I like the temperature and the tint how they are. It is a little bit dark, so I might turn that up a touch. Maybe just a touch more contrast. Highlights, I think, are looking pretty good. I'm gonna leave them as they are. Shadows can come up a bit because it is quite dark, but nothing too crazy. I'm just gonna do a little bit more on the whites. I think the blacks can come up a tiny bit as well. Don't want to lose too many details there. One tip I'll give you before I move on, I see a lot of people new to editing, they see the clarity slider and they make the connection clarity equals sharp focused image equals great photo. However, I personally don't think doing this and jamming the clarity slider all the way up looks pretty good. It looks very mechanical, it looks overly processed. So one tip I want you to take away from this editing tutorial, if nothing else, please, please, please don't overuse the clarity slider. For this reason, I actually often pull it down a tiny bit just to give it a slightly more dreamlike mystical thing, but then I will turn up the dehaze just a touch, just to get rid of any possible haze that's in the background. Turn up the vibrance a tiny bit, but since we're going for a moody edit, you don't really want those super bright colors anyway. I think I'm gonna leave it there for the basics tab. Now let's move on to the tone curve. This is where we're gonna get that real moody goodness. Now, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw this up quite a fair bit. And if you're not sure what I'm doing, I'm sort of flattening the image by turning the dark parts way up, and then I'm gonna go to the brightest parts of the image and turn them way down. And a quick little before and after of the tone curve, you can see I've really just made the image a bit more flat. I think this is a good canvas to start getting those moody edits dialed in. So I like to start doing this with the tone curve. However, it is maybe a little bit too flat. So just to punch a bit of contrast back in, I'm gonna add some points here and here and just do a little bit of an S curve, like so. I think that looks pretty good. It has, however, made the image a tiny bit dark overall, so I'm going to go back up to exposure, maybe pump that up to like, not too crazy, maybe like 0.7 is a good amount. I think that's looking pretty good for now. I might even turn these whites down a touch as well. I think that's looking pretty good. Touch more contrast. This, I've mentioned it in a previous editing tutorial, but I'm gonna say it again. Don't be afraid to go back to the tabs you've already covered and make adjustments as you go, because the adjustments you make later will come back and affect the image in different ways. So don't be afraid to jump back and make changes as necessary. Alrighty, so once the tone curve is done, the HSL tab, now this stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. Hue basically means what shade of color it's going to be. Saturation, how strong that individual color will be. And luminance, how bright or how dark that color will be. And for something like this, where you want to be changing the colors pretty heavily, the HSL tab is your best friend. So, I'm going to start on the hue. Sometimes I like to just drag the sliders left and right just to see how much it's affecting. As you can see, it's not changing the it's not changing the image a hell of a lot when I do that. I might just draw it a bit to the left, see what happens with the orange. A bit more is changing here. Again, I'm gonna do it a little bit more to the left. Same as yellow, not really affecting too much. However, if I go all the way to the right, you can see it's bringing a lot more green into the image. Since we want that desaturated green, you don't really want to slide it that way. So if anything, I'm going to slide it over this way a little bit. And now the green slider, this is obviously where we're going to have to play around with it a fair bit. I'm going to drag this really far to the left, maybe around, I think for this image, around -70 looks pretty good. Then for the greens, I'm also going to desaturate just the green. Obviously not all the way, because that starts to look a little bit too boring, but I'm going to bring it down quite a fair bit, maybe to around -80 or so. And then I actually like to turn the luminance up on the green a bit, just so it's not too flat and too boring. There is still something going on in the image. So maybe around +50 luminance for the greens. Then I'll go back and fiddle with the oranges and stuff if I feel I need to. I kind of like having a little bit of orange to counteract the desaturated green, so I might turn the saturation and luminance up a bit for the orange as well. See how that looks. Yeah, I think a little bit more of that looks pretty good. And maybe for the yellow, yeah, I don't really want that super yellowy color coming in, so I'm going to desaturate that a bit as well. And as you can see, with just a few basic adjustments in the Basics tab, putting an S-curve into the tone curve and playing around with the HSL sliders, we've already gone a long way to getting that moody green look that we're going for. There's a few more things we can dial into this edit to make it even more moody and even more punchy, so let's get stuck into those now. So we might do a bit of color grading here. With a photo like this, I think it might look pretty cool to pump a little bit of cooler tones into the shadows and maybe a little bit of warmth into the highlights, just to give it a little bit more punch and a little bit more contrast. As you can see here by me toggling this on and off, it's not a crazy difference, but it has just given that slight cool tinge to the image, which helps give it that moody green vibe. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Detail, I'm gonna just turn up the masking a bit and sharpen that a bit like that. You don't want to go too crazy, but for an image like this that's so zoomed in on just one subject, I think it looks pretty good to have the details pretty high. You want it to be nice and sharp, nice and crisp. And the very last thing I'm going to do is add a tiny bit of a vignette. You don't want to overdo it, you don't want to look like that. Maybe just around -5 is good. Alrighty, so we've done a pretty good job of getting that moody green edit dialed in already. If we have a quick look at the before and after, that's the before. It is quite dark, but it doesn't have that moody green feel to it. And the after, we've really just given it that flat, but at the same time still sort of punchy, desaturated, muted mood that accompanies a moody green edit. However, in my opinion, the image is still a tiny bit boring. It doesn't jump off the screen. There's nothing really dynamic or really engaging about it. And the way we can add those elements to the photo is with some local adjustments. And I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about right now. So what I'm going to do with this image is I'm going to start by pressing this button here and adding a radial filter. If you're not 100% sure what a radial filter is, check out my other editing tutorial when I describe it in a bit more detail, but for now, I'm just going to assume you know what I'm talking about when I talk about a radial filter. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. So the trick is to envision where the light source would be coming from naturally in this image and sort of mimic that. And as you can see in this image here, this part of the leaf seems to be getting the most light, whereas over here it's a little bit darker. So that leads me to believe the sun would be coming from over here. So I'm gonna zoom out and I'm gonna draw a big circle over most of the image, like that. Zoom back in, reset the effects, and then I'm just gonna increase the exposure. Maybe a little bit of warmth, but not too much, because we are still going for that moody, desaturated vibe. I'm gonna add a bunch of haze, something like that looks pretty good. Maybe turn up the blacks a tiny bit, a bit more contrast so it's not too boring, a little bit more clarity. And then I'm just gonna sort of play around with it, see what looks good. I think something like that, maybe down a tiny bit more. Maybe up that exposure even more. Something like pretty much 1 looks pretty good. Just sort of fiddle around till you find whatever you think looks good. I think that is looking pretty solid. So I'm gonna click that to minimize it. And then I'm gonna hit this one, which is the graduated filter. Again, check out my other video if you want a more detailed description of what this is. It's basically the same thing as a radial filter, except a straight line instead of a circle. I'm gonna click that. And just from the bottom here, I'm gonna sort of draw a line up over it like that. Spread it out so it's a nice gradual fade. And I'm gonna do the complete opposite. I'm gonna turn the exposure down, make it a little bit cooler, add a little bit of dehaze like that, turn down the blacks to make them nice and dark. I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe draw it over a bit more of the image like that. I think that's looking pretty good. And this, in my opinion, is the key to getting those really good moody edits. Directional light, having some parts of the image really bright and hazy and some parts really dark and moody, just really helps to create a great dynamic within the photo. I'm gonna show you a quick before and after I added the graduated filters so you can see the effect that that had. So if you go down here to where it says history and you scroll down, this is absolutely every edit we've made throughout the process. So it can be a good way just to see a before and after of certain things that you can't just toggle on and off. So here is where I added the radial filter. So if I go 1 step before that, that's what the image looked like without any graduated filters. And as you can see, it really just helps make it so much more interesting, so much more dynamic. And you know what, guys? I think that's pretty much it. I think we are rocking a pretty solid Moody Green edit right here. Let's jump back into the light box. I'm gonna press L and L again just to get rid of all the other distractions. Here's the before. As you can see, super dark, not very eye-catching, not a lot going on. And with everything we've done, we've really just done a classic Moody Green edit. And you know what, guys? That's it, we're done. That is one Moody Green edit. I wanted to keep this tutorial a little bit shorter for you guys, so I didn't go into full detail about everything in Lightroom. However, if there's anything you want to know a bit more about that you feel like I glossed over, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. But other than that, I hope you guys now have the confidence and the knowledge to go and try a Moody Green edit of your own. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.